Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for prayer.
Implement Arthur in approval Solomon in Frosta, the Lasso Energy, Onishkura College, Broad, the Corner Shop, the Grenop, the Carton of the Core. On supper, the Gog Amy in our Contafen, of the Conchiacana, and Quay Mishnus, and Kirch in our Cheer or Hog, the Jerhui of his Mats. Genoe doing a near regard to praise our Jirna. Amen.
Now, everyone, before we actually start the meeting, I want to pay tribute to Anya Carr, our staff officer who has covered the meetings for so long for the Sligo Borough District. And this is Anya's last meeting. Her position is being taken over by Dorothy's department, and it'll be Jude that's carrying out. And I'd like to thank Anya for the professionalism she has shown over the years. It has been said on many occasions that the minute taker was the most important person in the room, and I'd like just to acknowledge the dedication that Anya has given that work, and I'm sure everybody else here would like to be associated with it. I'd like to welcome Jude on board, and we do know that we can expect the same professionalism from Jude, and a lot of us would know Jude over the years. He was only a boy when he came onto the county council, as the man says, and we've shared a lot of history together over the years. So, Anya, you'll be missed, and Jude, welcome aboard.
We'd all wish to be associated with those remarks, Mayor.
Now, if it's all right with everybody, I would like to take item number 4 first. And we have a representation here is David McGlinchey from KPMG. David, would you like to?
If I could, Mayor, just well, first, in the first instance, is to wish you all a very happy new year. And this is the first meeting in 2022 of the Municipal District for the Sligo Borough and Strandhill. So, and maybe to move quickly on to the item, we have Bill Hines and we have James Shilton and David Midlenchey from KPMG Future Analytics. So you're very welcome. And I suppose what they're going to present, which is going to be a very brief overview of the work that they have done to date. This is part of the LECP, the Local Economic and Community Plan process. So we would have kickstarted, I suppose, the preparation and the preparatory work that would have been necessary for us to put in place a new LECP for Sligo from this year onwards, from the end of 2022, from 2023 to 2030. And I suppose our strategy is going to be called Sligo 2030. And the last year, there has been quite a number of consultations, there has been questionnaires, there has been surveys, which is all about preparing the ground and putting in place this socio-economic profile. And I suppose it outlines the vision and the high-level goals that Sligo is going to have as part of their LECP for the Sligo 2030 document. So I might just hand over to, there has been quite a bit of work done to date over the last while, and I'm sure that you have maybe attended some of the workshops or whatever else, so just maybe thank you for that as well. So I'm just going to hand over then to David, if that's okay. And David will just kind of give us an overview of the work that they have undertaken to date, and I suppose what happens from here.
Perfect. Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks, Mayor. I'll just share my screen here so everybody can see it. Can everybody see that? Yes?
Yeah, we can see it, David. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much. So my name is David McGlinchey. I'm a manager in KPMG Future Analytics, and thanks very much for joining us this morning. And as Dorothy said, we're just going to kind of run through at a high level the work that we've undertaken to date. So just a little bit about who we are. So we're a professional consultancy within the KPMG Deal Advisory Business Unit. We specialize in planning, research, and economics, and this is all underpinned by data analytics. So it's a really data-driven approach. We work with public and private sector clients and also extensively with the European Commission on applied research, particularly in areas of smart cities and urban resilience. We also have a large multidisciplinary team with extensive experience, and this includes planners, data analysts, researchers, strategists, and economists. And we can, of course, draw on the wider KPMG network of expertise as required as well. And then finally, we have extensive experience working with county councils involving comprehensive stakeholder engagement and consultation. So just a little bit about the Sligo 2030 process and how we got to where we are at the moment. So the first thing, as mentioned, that we did, pulled together a baseline analysis, and from that baseline analysis, the various data that we looked at, we produced the draft socio-economic statement along with the high-level goals and draft vision. That statement then was put forward to public consultation, and I'll go into more detail on this as we go through the presentation. We went through public consultation, and as part of the public consultation, we also had a number of surveys, interviews, and focus groups. We then used the information and feedback from those sessions to actually revise and expand the socio-economic statement, which is what we're here to discuss today. We're now moving towards the development of the objectives, actions, and outcomes. So that started, and in the next couple of weeks, we'll be working in a collaborative manner to further refine the objectives and actions and identify owners and specific targets. We'll then move to finalize the Sligo 2030 strategy before it moves forward for implementation and monitoring and adoption. Just a bit about the draft statement itself. So originally when this revised statement went out, so the purpose of it was really to provide the public with the opportunity to have their say on the development of the new Sligo 2030 plan, so that new LECP. What the draft statement covered included the summary profile of Sligo at a very high level. SCOT analysis, again, that's an initial SCOT analysis, so that's the strengths, constraints, opportunities, and threats for Sligo as it moves towards 2030. Guiding principles and areas of ambition, and then finally the draft vision and draft emerging high-level goals. As mentioned there, the draft document was placed on the Sligo County Council website for written feedback from the public over the course of 4 weeks. Just a bit about how we established or developed this statement itself. So the first thing there, if you look on the right-hand side, was all about establishing the context. So that's looking at local, regional, and national strategies and policies that influence Sligo. And we then developed that baseline analysis and profiles. So that's that socio-economic analysis and data points. And from the two of these, then we moved on to the SCOT analysis. So identifying key strengths, constraints, opportunities, and threats. And then from all of these things, we then developed the guiding principles and ambitions, and then finally the draft vision and high-level goals themselves. We just have a brief overview of the consultation. So as mentioned, the draft socio-economic statement was placed on the County Council website for written submissions. 63 submissions were received. We also had 2 online surveys, one for the business community and then one for the general community. So on the business side of things, we had 47 responses, and on the community survey, we got 171 responses. We also held a public webinar to introduce the project and also introduce the high-level goals and draft vision, and it was attended by 75 attendees on the 24th of June last year. We held 5 focus groups over the 7th and 8th of July, and very good information feedback came out of that. And similarly, we held 22 stakeholders interviews over June and July 2021, and again, great ideas and insights coming out of that have now fed into this revised statement itself. So the revised socio-economic statement, as mentioned, it takes on board all the feedback and insights that we gained through the consultation and expands a number of the sections that were already there. So what does it now include? So it now includes a full review of the policy context that will underpin the Sligo 2030 plan. The socio-economic profile has been expanded and updated with detailed information in areas such as population, housing and education, economy and employment, tourism, spatial context, transport and infrastructure, community well-being, the environment and climate change. The SCOT analysis has been updated and expanded and broken into themes. And then we've also included summary findings of the consultation process by key themes, including concerns raised around COVID-19 and Brexit, housing, climate change and transport. And then there's also aggregated results of the responses to both the community and business survey included as an appendix of the document. We also identified a number of needs. So the needs analysis chapter identifies the key areas for Sligo to address as it moves forward toward 2030. I'll be going into more detail on this in a second. And then finally, we have the revised draft vision and draft high-level goals, along with some revised high-level guiding principles and areas of ambition. If we look at some of the key findings that have come out from the data analysis, and now I've just picked out a number under very specific headings, but there's a lot more in the document itself. So the first under population, Sligo is growing, but at a slower pace than in previous periods. So that's 0.2% growth we see there between 2011 and 2016. It's the slowest rate recorded since the 1991 census. 16% of County Sligo's population are over the age of 65, which is higher than the state average of 13%. So again, that's something to keep in mind as we move towards 2030, ensuring that the Sligo makes provision for its elderly population. Sligo Town, people aged 20 to 29 are the largest cohort, yet there was a decrease of 19.9% in this group in the last census. So that's potentially pointing towards some kind of brain drain or something like that. On the household characteristics and deprivation, 28% of County Sligo's population live alone, which again is higher than the state average of 23%. So maybe keeping in mind, some initiative to address rural isolation, that sort of thing. The number of households registered on the Housing Assistance Payment Scheme has increased 300% from 2016 to 2019. And we know that there has been an associated increase in deprivation levels as well. To meet housing demand between 2020 to 2031, Sligo will need to increase the annual average number of new housing coming into supply from 139 to 468 units. So that's annual. So that's a 236% increase. So there's quite a lot of work to be done there. Looking at education, training and skills development, this is one of the key strengths. We'll talk about later on, but 47.7% of residents in Sligo aged 15 years and older hold some form of third level qualification. Education outcomes are improving across the county with a decline in those attaining solely primary or secondary education. And there is also a significant increase in those attaining master's or higher level degrees, and that's for both males and females, so it's across the board, so it's very positive there. On economic activity and employment, the top 3 industries for employment were professional services, commerce and trade, and manufacturing services. Unfortunately, there is a high commercial vacancy rate in Sligo, and depending on how you measure it, there's a number of different percentages put forward, but the geo-directory percentage would put it at 19.9% in the final quarter of 2020. Regardless of how it's measured, it's high and something that needs to be addressed to ensure that it doesn't contribute to economic decline across the county. From 2011 to 2016, Sligo's employment grew by just 2.2%, which is significantly below the national growth figure of 11%. And then if you look at Enterprise Ireland companies, so those indigenous, homegrown, internationally exporting companies, Sligo is underperforming in comparison to other counties in the region. So there is something there to be done as well. Like how do we create a kind of innovative ecosystem that allows entrepreneurs to kind of flourish and that sort of thing. If we look at the Scots analysis now, starting with the strengths, it's fairly straightforward. So Sligo being a designated regional growth centre with access via road, rail and air is very positive. As we've seen, there's strong educational attainment and educational infrastructure, including with the designation of the new technological university. And it's an attractive FDI location and has a good business community. There's outstanding culture, heritage and natural environment. And then one that came through very clearly from the consultation, key strength is the community and the volunteer groups that do fantastic work across the county. Constraints, as we've seen, the high commercial vacancy rate, the environmental impact of a high rate of car use for travelling to work and education. So that's 69% of people who use cars to get to work, and I think it's 58% use cars to get to education. The potential brain drain that's been identified with large numbers of young people leaving Sligo, and then the low employment growth in comparison to neighbouring counties. So that's all something that can be addressed. The opportunities, obviously there's the opportunity for the new integrated whole county approach to promote and develop Sligo under the Sligo.ie campaign. There's also the potential to become a leading smart and green county in Ireland. can work to attract further FDI and increase the number of homegrown companies, so increasing that number of Enterprise Ireland supported companies. And then there is an opportunity there to repurpose vacant or derelict buildings into innovation centres, venues for the arts and recreational spaces, as well as some other ideas that you'll see in the document itself. Threats, so obviously failure to secure buy-in from key stakeholders, both public and private, for the Sligo 2030 plan is a key threat in this process. The continued effects of Brexit and COVID-19 on trade and tourism, which are sure to continue for some while yet. Failure to adequately embrace technological change could also lead to a decrease in competitiveness, and then knock-on effect of that would be potentially losing out on FDI. Then climate change obviously will also have a significant impact on Sligo, including on the private sector and wider community. And this, it's going to have an impact everywhere, but it's particularly of note in Sligo, where you have such a stunning natural landscape. So from all that information, we identified a number of needs, and at a very high level, the following 7 areas were identified. So housing, so addressing the provision of housing and the lack of available private residential developments in Sligo to meet current and future demands. So you've already seen that there's a need for a 236% increase. And, as I said, that's vital for providing for the current community, but also for achieving population targets and attracting investment. On the economy, obviously growing the employment base and developing more job opportunities. As we've seen, employment growth can be improved on. So to meet growth and population targets again, there needs to be a significant increase in job creation and employment. Yes, that's attracting new investment, FDI, and that sort of things. But it's also trying to improve that number around the homegrown startups and companies, and creating that innovative ecosystem that allows those sort of companies to flourish. Transport, obviously increasing mobility and accessibility to and from Sligo, so continued upgrades to hard infrastructure such as the road network, increased connections maybe with Knock Airport. But also one thing that did come out of the consultation was the need for upgrades and additions to the active and sustainable infrastructure, so more cycleways, cycle paths, greenways, and that sort of thing. Then revitalising Sligo's town centres, so the regeneration of town centres, improving the public realm, and addressing that high commercial vacancy rate. And that's really important. It's been identified as a key issue both within this project, but also through the regional assembly as well. Climate change, this is all about focusing, preparing, and acting on the challenges of climate change. So as I said, it will have a significant impact, and Sligo needs to prepare now, including shifting, as mentioned, to more sustainable transport, increasing potentially the use of renewable energy and other sources of alternative energy, and increased recycling and moving towards that circular economy idea. On the community, ensuring inclusion and adequate services. So the community in Sligo, key strength, but it also has broad and wide-ranging needs. So that includes a lot of the things that we've talked about there already, so housing, jobs, and that sort of thing, but also access to healthcare, employment, education, and childcare as well. Then finally, a smart Sligo. So Sligo has an ambition to be a smart county. So this is all about defining and measuring Sligo as a smart county. So we need to define and agree what it's going to mean for Sligo, how we're going to measure it, and how it is going to be progressed as the county moves towards 2030. Then if we looked at the revised guiding principles, so the revised guiding principles are for a smart and innovative Sligo that drives sustainable economic growth, employment, and development. A green and sustainable Sligo that proactively addresses climate change and protects its environment. An equitable and inclusive Sligo that enables and encourages public participation and supports its people. And a vibrant and prosperous Sligo that strengthens its towns and villages and celebrates its culture, heritage, and the arts. Now, these guiding principles, I should say, underpin 4 key areas of ambition. These are growing Sligo into its role as a regional growth centre and increasing employment across the county, positioning Sligo to the forefront of smart digital transformation, positioning Sligo as an exemplar region in climate action in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, and improving the living conditions and health of the people of Sligo and supporting its vibrant communities. All of this then feeds into the revised draft vision, so it's taken in all of the updated analysis and expanded analysis as part of the socio-economic profile, but also our analysis of the feedback and insights that we received during the consultation process. So the vision now for Sligo is for a smart, sustainable, and socially inclusive Sligo, one that cherishes its vibrant communities, protects and celebrates its unique environment and rich culture, and is a champion of innovative growth and development. This then leads us on to the high level goals. And I will say before I go into these that the areas in the bullet points underneath that I'll go through, they're not specific actions at the moment, and they may be, some of them may become part of actions, but this is just how they could be achieved, what the goal is means, and that sort of thing. So goal 1, Sligo will be a key regional growth centre that drives sustainable economic activity and employment throughout the region and increases the population across the county. So what does this mean? How could it be achieved? So it's all about increasing sustainable employment, supporting existing businesses and attracting new investment, fostering an innovative and entrepreneurial environment. So, developing more of those companies that can be supported by Enterprise Ireland, addressing the housing crisis and the high commercial vacancy rate, and then capitalising on Sligo's educational strengths, obviously with the new technological university. Goal 2, Sligo will become a smart region and a leader in the utilisation of smart technology through partnerships with educational and commercial third parties. So what does this mean? It means building on the digital strategy and defining what being smart means for Sligo, developing a smart Sligo programme and potentially a body to oversee the progression of that programme, and becoming a pilot region for new smart technologies, and then using smart initiatives and concepts that are not necessarily technologically focused, so maybe a 15-minute city, seeing how that could be adapted, and using these concepts and initiatives to solve local problems in Sligo itself. Goal 3, Sligo will be a proactive county in the fight against climate change and a model of best practice in climate action with sustainability central to all areas of life. So what does this mean? It means increasing community and business participation in sustainable initiatives, maybe upgrading and expanding existing walkways, greenways and cycle paths. And again, that was a key theme that came out of the consultation. Increasing the local production, supply and use of green sources of energy, and then supporting initiatives around rewilding and protecting Sligo's natural habitats. So that's all about addressing the biodiversity crisis, which is a very important point. Goal 4, Sligo will be an inclusive, healthy and equitable society that supports its vibrant communities. So it's all about, as we mentioned already, ensuring that all the community has access to services related to health, education, employment, childcare, housing and transport, and continuing initiatives to reduce poverty and isolation where it exists, and supporting initiatives to ensure Sligo is inclusive and accessible, including for minority groups, the elderly, and those with disabilities. 5, Sligo will celebrate its rich cultural heritage and realise its tourism potential. So what does this mean? It means potentially continue to promote Sligo as one of Ireland's premier tourism destinations on the Wild Atlantic Quay. Sligo Jail has been in the news recently, so potentially something could be an attraction could be developed there. Increasing collaboration across the tourism sector in Sligo. Again, that was another key theme mentioned during the consultation process. A very specific point then, continuing to work with Sligo's Neolithic Landscape Group for UNESCO World Heritage status for the Sligo Neolithic Passage Tombs. And then finally, ensuring conservation plans are in place to protect the rich natural heritage and landscape that Sligo has. Again, the natural heritage and the beautiful landscape has been identified as one of the key strengths of the county as well. Goal 6, the final goal, a collaborative and innovative Sligo. And again, this is one of the key themes that came up during the consultation process. It's not identified as a need because it kind of runs through all of the needs that we've identified. So it's this kind of overarching need for more collaboration, communication and innovation across the county. So it's all about ensuring that collaboration is at the heart of Sligo's development, building those regional and national relationships to address infrastructure deficits where they might exist, building collaborative relationships with the neighbouring cross-border counties such as Leitrim, Mayo, Donegal, Roscommon and Fermanagh, and then developing initiatives to support greater collaboration and communication between the council, the private sector, the community and other key stakeholders. So that is the final goal. And then if I just give you a brief recap of progress to date. So what's done, the baseline analysis has been completed. The draft socio-economic statement, we developed the high-level, emerging high-level goals and draft vision That was then put to public consultation. Following the public consultation, we incorporated that feedback into the draft socio-economic statement, and it was expanded to include a full policy review, a needs analysis, and an updated socio-economic profile. What's in progress? So we have now started to work on the objectives and actions and the related identification of owners, and obviously the development of the draft Sligo 2030 plan is also underway as well. The next steps is to continue to work collaboratively to develop the objectives and actions, to further refine what we've identified so far, and then working to identify and get agreement from the owners of these actions and objectives, because obviously they are the groups and individuals that will be pushing the whole Sligo 2030 plan forward. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for that very progressive report. I open it to the floor. Does anybody want to come in on it? Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, David, for the report. I think the two things that struck me particularly were the need for housing to go from providing 139 units to 468 per year in order to meet the expected need. That is a huge demand, and it'll take a lot of resources to come together in order to fulfil that. So my query around that is, what do you need, what do you think needs to happen in order for that to be achievable? And then secondly, in relation to increasing the Indigenous exporting industries, and again, the same question, what do you think we as a county council need to do in relation to that, how we can support that? Thank you.
If I can, David, I can definitely come in on the first one. This is Bill Hines here, and thank you very much for your questions. On the housing need, and I think there's a great opportunity here for Sligo County Council, particularly when its review of its development plan, its HNDA, and also the housing need action plan. There's a great opportunity here now to say welcome many different avenues of housing provision and housing analysis, like both obviously through your own social provision, but also in collaboration with the private sector, and also in supporting the private sector opportunities as well. You know, both home ownership and private rental sector, and I know there has been many debates at national level around the whole issue of an over provision of private rental versus home ownership, etc. But there's definitely an opportunity here within the new development plan to really analyse that and to really strive forward, working with the department in the provision of, you know, a kind of a myriad of approaches for housing delivery to meet that need. I think there's a great opportunity here, and there's very good tools and techniques out there now provided by the department, etc., that to achieve that. So there's great opportunity in that sense. And on the Indigenous industries, and I'll let James and David come in on this afterwards, but again, it's true, kind of working with that, what we found, working with that local desire, innovation, and ability within the employment sector, to really support and work with the provision and creation of greater job creation. As you've seen in many of the goals there, there's a diversity of ranges of employment opportunities, everything from the green, the tourism, the energy, the sustainability, as well as supporting the already very strong Indigenous companies there. And I think there's a great opportunity through the LECP again to really support that. And I just draw ourselves back to the action sessions we had there in early December, and a lot of great opportunities and innovative ideas came from those action meetings around how we as a council, as a region, can really support that Indigenous growth of opportunity. I don't know if James and David want to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. Yeah, no, on the companies, definitely. I agree with what you're saying there, and it'll definitely be important to work with the likes of the local enterprise office, Enterprise Ireland. But I think one of the things that could be done as well, just to potentially provide more support and to kind of address, the issue of creating, how do you create that innovative ecosystem, would be to review what supports and programs are available and in place already, and review any barriers, or try to identify any barriers that might make it more difficult for budding entrepreneurs to start a business. So I think one of the things that may have come up in some of the conversations during the consultation was looking at some of the programs that are available, and just looking at what the requirements might be of them, because I think potentially one of the issues that was raised was that you might actually have to leave full-time employment, so you'd have to go into the program for startups. You'd have to leave your job, so you wouldn't have that security to fall back on if your startup failed. Whereas I know in some other programs elsewhere across the country, you could join the startup program, but you can also retain full-time employment as well, so you can go to it after work or at the weekend or that sort of thing. So it's potentially just reviewing those supports and programs just to ensure that any barriers that might be there, potentially that they're removed, or we can see what we can do just to make it slightly easier.
Councillor O'Boyle.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the report. It's very interesting. Just with the lack of housing and the lack of jobs, would that be kind of correlated to the fact that we're nearly 9% behind the national average? There's not that many houses here. You're on about going up to 300 or nearly 470, like, and we're only in the 100 mark. Is the jobs and the lack of housing linked? So, like, if it's the case that we had more employment in the county, we could see an increase of bills.
Yeah. If I can just jump in quickly on this one, yeah, the 100% linked. If you chat to the IDA, they'd be saying that one of the key barriers to investment and attracting new companies to Sligo at the moment is the lack of housing. So you're kind of in that catch-22 situation where you can't get companies to come because of the lack of housing, and then potentially you can't get developers to come because they don't have the people. So it is linked, and it's a very difficult issue to address.
So something has to come first: the houses or the jobs. Just on the. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to add one point to David. Also, is that particularly FDI, it's and it has been for at least a decade now. But they're the kind of, particularly from the multinational perspective, they're very keen on linking the quality of the job with the quality of the environment and the quality of life. And Sligo in particular has an excellent, say, quality of life offer. And there's a great opportunity to maximise that. You know what I mean? Again, as David was saying, through the provision and linking with the housing and the employment. You know what I mean? So that quality of life offer is kind of really at the forefront for Sligo to really maximise.
Yeah, and just we're on about climate change there, and then the transport from people going to work and college. Is this not kind of a good idea for the likes of free transporters and buses or extra rail lines coming into the county, whereas the fact that people can work outside of the town or outside of the county and get transport in, rather than people in cars the whole time? As we know, we're going to have to change our means of transport. But I just think now that we can see in the reports you've done that there is that severe need for the likes of extra rail and transport. And just the last query I'd have is, down the Quay here, the Dawson Sligo, would that not be a means of opportunity for exporting goods, as in to bring employment in that? Is that an opportunity or an idea that we could push on?
Yeah. If I take your first point on the transport, definitely that the more public transport, active travel infrastructure, all of that sort of thing came up in the consultation process. Now, I do know, obviously, from the council point of view, there is a limit to what the council can do there, because there is other, the National Transport Authority and the likes of them would also need to be involved. So it'd be potentially getting them around the table, setting up a working group to discuss how they can assist in addressing some of these issues. On the docks, there's definitely potential for commercial and recreational use. Now, if you're talking about exporting from the docks itself and cargo and things like that, I think there's an issue around silt. So I'm not sure if that's feasible at the moment, but the use of the docks in general for commercial and recreational purposes, I think, is definitely something that should be looked at.
Yeah, possibility for some housing accommodation. I'm sure there's abilities to be able to reclaim land, but thanks very much for your report. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to add to that?
Mayor, I have my hand up.
Councillor Grady.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, David, I would like to thank you for your very concise report, and indeed very easy to listen to you giving that report. So I want to thank you first of all for that. It's worrying when we see that we're not performing in attracting business into our area. The multiples like Abbott and those that we were able to attract in the past. And over the last number of years, there has been mention of that we hadn't the road infrastructure. We had the infrastructure, and when people came to Castle Baldwin and seen it from there down, this was a huge issue. But now we have that road infrastructure, such as it is huge improvement. And certainly, I don't know what more we can do, or the IDA can do, to try and attract. I know we've got some jobs in the last fortnight, but try to attract a multinational in this area again. And I certainly will be interested. And I know all those decisions are made at government level, at ministerial level. That's where those decisions are made. And maybe that's an issue for this area, that we haven't somebody in at the bargaining table. The vacancy rate, and I would just like to hear what you feel we could do as a council to try and help and promote that we get our fair share at the table, which we haven't been getting. The vacancy rate, I have been part of the Business Improvement District, as is the Mayor now a member of the Business Improvement District. And the vacancy rate has been an ongoing issue for many years. And many business people have indeed tried many different things, like giving businesses rent-free for arts and all of that kind of thing. But it doesn't seem to last, and it doesn't seem to take away that vacancy rate. So I would be very interested to know, have you any bright ideas on how that could be addressed? My questions are simple, but they're bread and butter stuff that's on the ground: vacancy, jobs, and yes, jobs linked with housing. And we have to be very careful and mindful when people want to build housing of all sorts in our area, that they're accompanied and helped, and that we're not preventing progress. So, David, I'd be interested to know the vacancy rate and how we can attract, or what we can do as a council to attract multinationals to come in, seeing that we're not at the ministerial table. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's good questions. On attracting investment, I think to a certain extent, more conversations maybe with IDA around what their specific ideas are, because generally they won't want them to be public knowledge, let's put it that way. So there may be key specific sectors that they're targeting, and then it's kind of adopting that whole, I always call it a whole systems approach, so that the community, the private sector, the council, the technological university are all kind of working together, and then to attract investments. But if you look at kind of the value propositions at a country level anywhere, there's a number of key areas that are usually front and center. So the talent, so Sligo has the talent, obviously through the ATU. The infrastructure, both in terms of hard infrastructure such as roads, rail, and also have the airport. And I know that the rail and the airport aren't currently used for cargo, but potentially that's something that can be explored. Location, obviously being close to the airport, not overly, again, it's kind of tying into infrastructure as well. But I think that potentially one of the key things missing at the moment is just telling the story better. So having the track record, so being able to point to companies that have already come to Sligo and they are there, and there's also Indigenous companies that are there. So it's potentially, working with IDA to tell that story better for Sligo, and then once you can tell that story better, and you can show that the infrastructure is in place and the talents is already available, and the housing's there, I think you'll start to potentially see some improvement in attracting those big companies again. But the housing is really key. IDA will say that as well. That's one of the key barrier to investment in Sligo at the moment. So addressing that is really key. On the commercial vacancy rate, James, I know that you've done work on the town centre first policy and things like that. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning all, and thanks for the question, Councillor Gwynny. Yeah, we've done a significant amount of work in this area, looking at vacancy and dereliction, and contributing to government studies on this. I mean, it's an issue with most town centres now, and I don't think many town centres are actually free of this issue, and some obviously have some to a greater and lesser extent. The issues being tackled, attempting to be tackled at national level at the moment, with different studies and different funding schemes that are being issued at the moment. I mean, the key to it initially is to understand that vacancy, and that's finding out who owns the properties, and getting some proper data on that, mapping those, finding out who actually owns a building, what their intentions are, that building, what the barriers are to bring those buildings back into use. And from studies that we've done, particularly from Mayo County Council, on Ballinrobe, which has a vacancy rate of around 25%, then we found, and the other consultants working on similar studies found that the issues were fairly similar. It was, in many cases, it was buildings that had complicated financial histories, and they were owned by banks or legacy issues. In some, then they were just legacy issues where someone had passed on and the building had a disputed title. In other cases, it was issues where the building was actually owned by the bank, and in many cases, this is the case, that they're sitting on the bank's loan book and they're not being moved on. And in other cases, it's just because the building owners aren't aware of what financial opportunities there are of grants available for them to bring those buildings back into use. So partly it's about just a database of who owns the vacant and derelict buildings that can be updated. And then it's about a carrot and stick approach. It's about trying to bring some of those buildings back into use. I know, Councillor Grady, you mentioned that some owners have tried that sort of repurposing, but perhaps in the current climate, there are other opportunities around recreation or digital use or arts or craft or creative for some of those buildings. But for others, it's incentives and penalties, the carrot and stick, to try and bring those buildings back into use. There's a range of different tools which are available, and which are there's a new grant scheme, I understand, coming into place to enable people to purchase some of those buildings. So there's a variety of different tools, and this is a topic that came up many times through the conversations we're having, and we'll certainly be having a focus on that in the document.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anybody else like that? Yeah. Well, I suppose I want to thank Dave and I want to thank Bill and James for the presentation here this morning. I think it's vital. I think everything was really covered in relation to it. The only thing that I would say, there wasn't enough emphasis, I think, put on the freight that we brought into Sligo one time, which we lost by rail. I think that is an awful loss. I think it's something that we need to bring back. I think we South the Western Distributor Corridor, for that to be reopened, will be a massive asset to Sligo. And of course, I'd love to see Strandhill Airport up and running again. These are not questions we have run not over the time this morning, but I feel myself that it was so valuable, the information that you shared here with us this morning, and it was worth every minute that was spent on it. So once again, I'd like to thank David, Bill and James from KPMG for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could I just say, members, that the municipal district will hear more of this. We're moving now on to the next phase, which will be the development of the strategy itself and actions, I suppose, to implement those high-level goals and that the vision. So hopefully before the end of Q1, we will have further presentations to the municipal district. And of course, the LECP is a statutory document. It has to be adopted by the full council.
Can that report be sent out to us? Can that report be sent out?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and it'll be on our website as well, yes.
The slides, actually, I think is what, yeah, the report was circulated with the agenda, but certainly the slides are a very good summary. Yeah, we'll arrange that. Yeah, thank you.
All right, members, item number 1, to confirm the minutes of the meeting in the Borough District held on the 18th of October 2021. Copy attached. Opposed? By Councillor Boyle. Seconded by Councillor Maguire. To confirm the minutes of the budget meeting of the Borough District held Sligo on the 20th of October 2021. Proposed by Councillor O'Boyle. I'll second it. Matters arising from the minutes. Fair enough. Item number 5, presentation of the proposed public relevant enhancement for Strand Hill, Leonora McConville Community Economic Development. Report to follow.
Leonora will just give a brief update on our work on the development of those 2 public, for the Strand Hill one, for this municipal district. So Leonora has a brief presentation with just a number of slides and particularly a lot of graphics, infographs. So I'll hand over to Leonora because obviously you're all very familiar with this and there has been quite a bit of consultation as well.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy. Can you all hear me? And can you all see the presentation?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. So thank you, Mayor, thank you, Dorothy, and good morning, Happy New Year to everyone. So I'm here today to talk about Strand Hill, and in particular, a Part A process that we're hoping to commence in a number of weeks. So I have a short presentation that just talks about our journey so far. So I will. So this project is funded by the Rural Regeneration and Development Fund, and you're probably all aware now at this stage that we got money in, I think it was late 2020, to commence preparation of the first phase of a public realm enhancement project for Strand Hill. So you're all familiar with the RRDF, and these are just some of the aims of the fund, to rejuvenate towns and villages, support people to live, work and learn in their own communities, enhance unique outdoor amenities and strengthen rural economies. So we looked at Strand Hill and, so that's Strand Hill there, beautiful. This is Strand Hill we know and love, and this is also part of Strand Hill. This is not enjoyable for anyone really, and we felt we could do better than this. I suppose Strand Hill is in danger of becoming a victim of its own success, and there's a lot of conflict between pedestrians and vehicles, and we're all familiar with that. So we looked at all of this, and based on the aims of the RRDF fund, we come up with a couple of an overarching vision for Strand Hill was so to readdress the balance between pedestrians and vehicles, improve safety and the overall visitor experience, enhance tourism potential and capacity, and very important, to support the residential function of the village and enable the village to grow in a sustainable and safe manner into the future. So we started off this project with an online survey that we held in July and August last year, and we received 485 submissions, which was amazing. And Then we summarised these, and there was an overwhelming support for some kind of change in Strandhill. That definitely came back very loud and clear. The traffic speeds, along Shore Road and the shorefront, and just a lot of issues raised around parking and conflict between vehicles and pedestrians. A number of other issues raised too, that were outside the scope of this project, like public facilities, but we were focusing on what the public realm enhancement part of it. So we took the kind of results from that survey, did a little bit of work, and then in October we went out again to public consultation in a more detailed fashion, and we received 28 written submissions, which were very useful. So this is what went out in public consultation. We kind of put out an overall vision for Strandhill. So, when you come down here at the council car park, there should be some kind of gateway to signify that the council car park here on Shore Road is the main place to park. We wanted to do some kind of public realm enhancement on the Shore Road, widen footpaths as much as possible. Obviously, we have to maintain two-way access, but we wanted to look and see what could be done here. And then the shore front, based on our online survey, we felt what people wanted was to reduce car parking and provide more civic space along here. So in particular, we put out 3 options to people. So this was the first option, which really wasn't an awful lot of change. It was reduced car parking, increased public civic amenity space, some kind of public realm enhancements on Shore Road, and we also propose a pedestrian link. This is in the development plan, the mini plan for Strandhill, but this was kind of a key part of our proposal as well. So pedestrian link from the council car park down to the shorefront, and this, of course, is private land, so it's dependent on consultation with the landowner. Option 2 then was a seasonal approach. So you would restrict access during the summer months. So all of Shore Road and the shorefront would be pedestrian. And during the winter, then you would have anybody could go down. There might be there would be reduced car parking, but there will be access for everyone. Obviously, access for businesses and residents is allowed all through the year. And then option 3 then was a full pedestrianisation. So this is what people told us. So for the overall master plan that I presented first, 70% were positive and 30% were negative. So just looking at the options, 80% of people were not in favour of option 1. So if I just go back to option 1, that was option 1, which was a limited kind of limited change, really. So 80% were not in favour of that. Option 2, 41% were in favour of this option, which was the seasonal access. And option 3 was the full pedestrianisation. So 56% of people were in favour of that. So what were the key points raised in the consultation? So access for disabled parking permits, design of the pedestrian link, off-road pedestrian link that I talked about, consider green travel, impact on parking provision, and creation of civic space was number 5. So, sorry, I'm going back. So we looked at all that, we summarised the submissions, and we went back to people in a progress report in so over Christmas, so for the 22nd of December, I just about got it out before Christmas, and everybody who made a submission got an email, and they were told about this, and it was online, it was advertised on social media, and this summarised the October consultation, and it set out a kind of a direction of where we want to go. So this is the aim: to strengthen Strandhill's position as a unique coastal destination enjoyed by all members of the local and wider community. Proposals will seek to readdress the balance between vehicles and pedestrians, creating a safer environment for social interaction and engagement with the unique landscape. So our key objectives, based on what we heard people saying to us, were to ensure pedestrian safety, strengthen pedestrian connectivity, reduce traffic speeds, enhance the character of views, reconfigure parking, and increase the amount of civic space. So this is what went out in December. This is just a kind of a very broad indication of where we were going. Now, this proposal shows the high season and low season access. We've kind of gone a bit beyond that. And so this is what we're looking at now. So this is the shore front, this Mammy Johnson's, Shells, Voya, and the apartments. And so we're looking at dedicating all this space here to promenade, to pedestrians. There'll be 2 loading bays, designated loading bays, which is an improvement to what's there at the minute. And then car parking will be over at this end of the promenade. So we're going to have 10 number designated parking bays, and we look to providing 10 number age-friendly parking bays. And I know these have been very successful in Sligo town. And then so this really is all pedestrian areas, really enhancing the promenade. There'll be a turning head here, which can also be used as a multifunctional space for events and the like. And then this is just a look at the council car park on the Shore Road. So we'll be looking at enhancing the Shore Road, widening footpath, and reducing the carriageway to 5 metres. So this is really an indication that we don't want people driving down here, and it's difficult to drive down. That really people should be looking at parking in this council car park as much as possible. We're also going to look at this council car park to try and enhance the number of spaces that we can get in here. We believe there is an opportunity to get a number of spaces. And we're also looking at this pedestrian link from the council car park towards the surf centre and the open space here. And again, we're in discussions with the landowners. So that's it, really. This is just a kind of few images of what a pedestrian promenade could look like, and that's it. So I'm happy to take questions, and I hope to engage with each one of you individually over the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonora. Councillor Bree.
Mayor, I wish to thank Ms McConville for her report. I think it's noteworthy that as part of the public consultation process, over 400 people responded to the online survey relating to the enhancement of the area. And while the follow-up consultation didn't attract as much participation, the combined responses obviously assisted the planners and the steering group and the consultants in drafting proposals for improvement works in Strandhill. The proposed widening of footpaths and the narrowing of the Shore Road will, I think, clearly be welcomed. The development of a new pedestrian link from the council car park to the new surf centre is something which has been sought for quite some time. Now, I'm aware that this can only progress with the cooperation and support of the landowner and local residents, and hopefully there will be a positive response from them as matters are progressed. I also welcome the recommendations that the public space at the promenade be enhanced as a pedestrian and child-friendly area which is not dominated by cars. And if we want Strandhill to be safe for pedestrians and children and easy for everyone to visit, we need to take on board the views of those who made submissions and deliver an appropriate enhancement scheme. So in that regard, I very much welcome the report and the progress we've made on the issue. One query I would have for Ms McConville is in relation to cyclists. There doesn't seem to be much emphasis on facilities for parking bikes, and if we're reducing the carriageway, does that create a difficulty for cyclists? Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's certainly in terms of cycle parking, that's all a detail that will definitely be considered, and it was certainly raised a good bit on the public consultation. In terms of a cycleway down from Shore Road to the promenade, I mean, there really isn't the space for that. I suppose, you know, I think once we traffic calm and reduce the amount of cars going down Shore Road from the council car park, I think that should be enough to provide a safe means of access for cyclists to get down there.
Just before I allow Councillor Maguire in, would there be any possibility for you to take down the slide so that we can have a view if Councillor O'Grady wanted to come in there or anybody else? Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks very much, Leonora, for the very detailed presentation. I had contributed towards the consultation and was happy to do so. And I think the level of engagement that you received is indicative of how interested people are in Strandhill in improving the seafront. And I'm delighted to see that you've been in a position to take on so many of the suggestions and recommendations that were made. I think it'll be hugely beneficial to everybody, both visitors and locals alike, when these works are completed. Particularly, I think the widening of the footpaths to the shore road is going to be really beneficial. It's incredible how often you see people having to currently step onto the carriageway just because of the level of pedestrianisation. And obviously, if you're meeting somebody with a buggy, that's inevitable, but often it's only pedestrians and they force other pedestrians out onto the carriageway. One item that I'm not sure whether it arose or not during your consultation, but something that people have spoken to me many times about is that unfortunately the current public area to the right hand side of the seafront is frequently used as a car park or a parking space for motorcyclists. So that's obviously very dangerous. It's an area where young families tend to play, kids are allowed to run around, and it's become an impromptu area. And I have addressed it with the engineering team before. I was advised there was nothing that we could do from a council perspective in relation to stopping that happening. So I'm wondering if this is an opportunity and whether that could be addressed to try and prevent motorcyclists particularly from driving down there and parking up on what is the footpath on that paved area. But otherwise, I'm delighted to see that we're holding on to the car parking spaces for disabled holders, and also for, I think you're going to have some additional spaces possibly for people trying to drop off with surfboards, which is often an issue, particularly for younger surfers, to get them as close to the sea as possible. I just want one question for you, Leonora, if you can advise in relation to the progress with the landowners and how many landowners are involved there. And if you could indicate, because that is a huge issue, that if people could walk on a footpath from the main car park down to the surf centre, that would be a big benefit for lots of people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So just in terms of the car parking for motorcyclists, it's actually something I wasn't really aware of, but I'll definitely we'll definitely look into it. I'll say to the consultants and see is there anything we can do in that regard. In relation to the off-road walkway from the council car park down to the surf centre, down to the shorefront. So there's one landowner involved, and I have been engaging with this landowner for I suppose since we started this project, and I'm hoping to meet with him this week, and we're hoping we'll I suppose I can't say any more than that, other than I've had no commitment so far, but I'll be continuing to engage with him. So that's all I could say at the moment.
Councillor O'Grady.
Thank you, Mayor. Leonora, thank you for the report and for the work that you've been doing in bringing this so far. And it's very welcome to see Strandhill progress in the way it has. It has been a huge success in many aspects over the last years. I'm very heartened that you're in conversation with the landowner, because I think that's the key. And I know that land is up for sale presently for some time. And I think that's the key, that there would be a pathway down there, or a boardwalk down to the surf centre. The widening of the footpaths, we all know, walking with children and grandchildren down the shore road have been a nightmare in years. Who'll step off the road and who'll stay on who'll step onto the road and who'll stay on the footpath. So I welcome it. I think you have done the consultation with the people. People are happy. They've been listened to. And I think that's the key of all development, that when the community feels that they've been involved and their views respected, that things progress much quicker than if it's not. So I want to thank you for that and look forward to ongoing developments in Strandhill, but well done.
Thank you.
Anybody else on that?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, are we going to vote on this at municipal level, or is it all going to come back before the General Council?
Well, okay, we'll just have to check that out. Normally Part 8s go to the full council. Yeah, so definitely, I suppose this is just an update. There's no voting required today. But certainly, Part 8.
Before it comes to the council, will it go before the community in Strandhill by way of a public meeting?
I'm not sure if it by way of a public meeting, but I know that Leonora has, like, we've done quite a bit of consultation on this. We've got good feedback, and I suppose that feedback has been more or less put into, I suppose, the various options. I think Leonora would be what you're saying.
I'm not taking Leonora short. I just want some steer. If a public meeting was organised in Strandhill, would the council make officials available for that meeting?
Oh, I suppose if that was necessary, if it was necessary as part of, I suppose, getting this over the line, and particularly just to make sure that we have that buy-in.
Yeah. It's just, I suppose, I'm going back to the surf school, and in fairness, from start to finish, it was a very good collaborative process and included the community at every stage, and I think that was important. Leonora, thanks very much for your excellent presentation, and certainly, like other councillors, I think the pedestrianised link, the widening of the footpaths, and I suppose any access to accommodate those with mobility issues or cyclists. Personally, myself, I think it would be a retrograde step to deny people to park at the shore front. That's my position. I'm consistent on that, and I think that is something that we really need to rethink if it is a situation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leonora, but my understanding from the map is that the parking will be away from the shorefront. Is that correct? Or is there any provision for parking spaces at the shorefront?
So what we've shown on the concept drawings is 10 designated disabled spaces and 10 age-friendly spaces. So that's just the kind of what we're looking at the minute. Yeah.
But they're not on the shore front. They're the other side of the road. Is that correct?
Oh, they're on the other side of the road. But I mean, it's. I suppose the idea would be that you drive down and reverse into them, so you're looking at the waves that way. Yeah. Will I share my screen again? Would that help?
Yeah, that'd be grand.
Just very quickly, I'll just so. So that's so if you can see the red and the pink spaces, so the idea is that you'd drive down, reverse in, you'd have a narrow carriageway. This green is a planting strip, and then this is all promenade. So that to me is the shorefront. Is that what you mean, Councillor?
No. The shorefront to me is the other side of the road. That's the shorefront. Your parking spaces or proposed parking spaces are the other side of the road. Isn't that correct?
That's what's shown there. Yeah.
No, that's okay, Leonora. I'm not taking issue with that. It's just by way of clarification purposes. Again, thanks for the report. My opinion and view on it would be that it would be a retrograde step to deny people parking facilities at the shore front where I've identified, which is opposite the proposed parking spaces. And I couldn't support a proposal that would deny people parking at the shorefront. But thank you for your report, and thanks to everybody involved. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mayor, can I just say, my understanding is that this report was brought before us to ascertain the views of the Borough District members, and that if we had no significant objection, that it would go to Part 8 and that it would come before the full council for adoption. And I'm assuming there's no significant, I know Councillor McSharry has a problem with parking, but it would appear that the rest of us are favourably disposed towards it. So, if necessary, I would propose that it go to Part 8.
I'd like to second that, and I'll tell you exactly where I come in on it myself. It's Strandhill is one of the most beautifulest areas that anybody can go to. It's there for everyone, and I mean everyone. But the one thing that we all expect when we go down there into Strandhill is health and safety. Every one of us knows there's signs up there that not to use, that's not a friendly swimming beach. That's fair enough. But when you go down there and you're going down as far as to do the walks with your children or anything else, the one thing that you expect is a certain amount of safety. And that is what this document is providing. And I 100% agree with this document. I seen it, and the one thing that I do like in relation to it, there was submissions from the community, there was submissions from the business community out there. All the vested interests have all on board with this, and I will support it. That has given me my direction in relation to it. But thinking on the way that Strandhill is on a busy summer's day, and you have a lot of people that don't even know the run of it when they're coming maybe first time at the Strandhill, and they want to get as close to the beach as they can to go walking for miles over the beach. This is the part that gets me. Most people who go to the Strandhill go to walk around as far as Colleenamore when the tide's out. I've done it myself on loads of occasions, but yet they have a problem if the car isn't parked up to the seafront. But the one thing that I would ask in relation to it, and I'm going to move it here in relation to it, if I have the council's support in relation to it, I have a motion here in relation to it, is that this county council provide a number of mother and child parking bays at Strandhill seafront. That's along with what is going there, even if it's only 3 or 4, because as anybody knows, the struggle any young mum has, maybe with a baby and a toddler, if they're going as far as the beach, to try and get the go-kart from the pram and everything else, and to have it there beside them. And it's a lovely treat for them, maybe to bring the child over for an ice cream or whatever else, and they don't go very much further than the promenade. So what I am asking is that a number of mother and baby parking bays be included. We use them everywhere else. We use them at supermarkets. We use them everywhere else for easy access. And it's the same on the struggle of that. But as for the document itself, I am 100% behind it. I think it's a fantastic document, and I think there's vision in it, and especially that there has been full consultation with the community. And I would like to say well done to everybody involved in drawing this up. And I'm proud to second Councillor Bree's motion in relation to it. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor. Sorry, and I know we've a lot of work to do. The only concern I'd have is this is the first time I've seen these slides, and I'm just wondering.
The slides were provided to all of us during the public consultation, and each public representative was invited to partake individually.
I'm just making a point, Councillor Maguire, please.
But I'm correcting your point. You're saying you didn't see them.
This is the first time I've seen them. That is the position. So I'm just making that point, and I'm just wondering, is there people in the community that haven't seen them? And I think we have to be very careful. It's quite radical proposals. And each of us are here as elected public representatives by the people. We all have our voice. We are all entitled to our say. And my only concern would be, and all I'm asking is, between now and implementation, what are the steps? I know if we move to Part 8, how long will that take? If maybe that could be clarified.
Okay, well, we can come back to you, sorry, yeah. We can come back to you with those steps if that's okay, Leonora. Yeah. Okay.
Now, can I ask, is my motion agreed? I'm looking for a seconder.
I'd agree with that motion. I think it's very well thought out, and it's certainly something that would make a lot of sense.
Agreed with it?
There's no doubt, and I think the actual scheme that has been introduced by Ms. McConville actually does express concern about a safe space for pedestrians, for parents and children. I think that's very much part of the project. I found it interesting when I received the agenda, your proposal about a mother and child parking bay. And then I asked myself, is there such a thing in law? I know in private supermarkets and so on you have it, but I haven't come across it in public car parks. I'm just wondering, what is the legal status? Can anyone tell us? while we can agree to it, can it be enforced? I suppose that's the question. Or is there such parking spaces designated in Irish law?
Aware of now, but maybe
Sorry, Mayor, the only designation between spaces that I'm aware of are your standard parking space and a designated or blue badge holder parking space. I'm not aware that in legislation there's provision for mother and child, parent and child, even the age friendly will actually have to check the status of that. But right now, as I understand it, there's only 2 designations.
So certainly, where I agreed in principle with your proposal, but I suppose we'll have to leave it to the planners to see if it can be implemented in some way or other.
If I could just make one comment on that, I suppose the purpose of one of the objectives of the proposals here is that the entire space from the main car park down to the promenade will effectively become a shared space. And one of the key objectives is to reduce the number of vehicle movements that go up and down through that space. Now, the risk is that if we start to provide a range of different type of parking spaces, that, you know, as a parent and child, well, I'm aware that there's some parent and child parking spaces down there, so I'm going to chance my arm and I'm going to go down and I'll see is there any of them available. So we're encouraging more people to want to, you know, make that decision to drive down into a space that we're trying to create as a shared space and a more pedestrian friendly space. We need to change the human psyche on that, and we need to encourage people to park in the car park and walk down through what is going to become a much more relaxed and safer space. And look, with respect, you know, we should be encouraging young kids to walk. And look, as a parent, I understand the challenges of pushing buggies and holding another child. But if you can do that in a more safe environment, as we're trying to create here, then, you know, we should have a successful outcome.
I would agree with you, and I would agree, even as you says there, that there's absolutely nothing legally written in stone or in law, right, that's to allow for that. But there's nothing written in law either in relation to the age friendly. So, like, could we not incorporate 1 or 2 of them spaces along with that? Like, what's to stop anybody going down there age friendly? Like, in fairness, like, I'm in the early 60s at the moment, but there's nothing stopping. Who's to stop me going in there and I'm well able to walk the distance? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really down to a person's kind of, how would you call it? Their own decency kind of, and how to use it and how not to use it, and that's it. But I think myself that we won't know if it'll work or it won't work if we don't try it. And that's it. Because remember, if it is a thing that we just hit this on the head now, we might as well hit the age-friendly one on the head. You know, and I look at the age-friendly one where there is people out there has mobility, they don't have a disabled parking, but they do have mobility problems that they're maybe able to walk maybe 20 yards, and that's maybe the height of it. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of where I be looking at it. But I think myself, it's like everything else. It's kind of just down to decency of people kind of abusing these spots or not. So look, I put the motion to the floor. If it's adopted, fair and well, because it's not written in law, it doesn't mean I'd leave it up to the Leonora and her team to look at it, to see if it can be incorporated or not. It's not written in stone, Leonora. We're not going to come back and say we adopted this at such a meeting and it has to go through or whatever else. I'm just looking for yourselves to use it to see can it be incorporated within it. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Everybody have enough of that? Leonora, thanks very much for your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Sorry, Mayor, is that you dealing with item 12? Item 12 again?
Item 12
Proposed
and
Well, I think I appreciate the sentiment of your motion, and it makes a lot of sense. And you're trying to accommodate parents with young families, but I don't really think can we adopt a motion that, you know, there's no basis in law for, you know, if that is the case. So
Well, I have no problem, if everybody's in agreement, like the Herman withdraw the motion.
Well, no, I wouldn't say withdraw.
Well, I would-
I think we would support that maybe if there was signage or priority for like, as Councillor Breen said, you see it in the supermarkets, where there's priority for shoppers with young families or something. So maybe it's something that, I don't know.
Mayor, I'd be prepared to second it, no problem at all. And as you say, let Leonora and the planners have a look at it, see if it can be delivered. If, insofar as possible, we'll all have to accept the law at the end of the day. Reasonable compromise.
Yes, agreed.
Item number 6, the draft, the draft multi-annual Restoration Improvement Programme 2022-2024 report attached. I think the report speaks for itself. Does Breon want to come in on that? Or is everybody happy enough to move on with it? Breon, does that need a proposal? I'll second.
Thank you.
There's more money in the proposal, right?
Yeah.
I wish we had more money too.
The third motions to consider the following motion submitted by Councillor Rosaleen O'Grady.
I second that.
Yes.
You're on mute, Rosalie.
You're on
With your
mute, Rosalie.
permission- Yeah, okay. With your permission, Mayor, I ask that that motion will be left on the agenda and I'll defer it again until our next meeting.
Item number 8. Right, to consider the following motion submitted by Councillor O'Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking for a report on this. I was contacted by some of the residents, and the cap on the wall itself, like the wall itself is fairly old, but just the caps at the top are kind of loose, and there's water coming through at the bottom on the footpath. Just say it's rendered.
Councillor O'Grady, we can all hear you.
So, Mayor, the air engineer has inspected this wall previously and is satisfied to its overall structural integrity. Notwithstanding, it's intended to undertake some routine maintenance works at this location over the coming months to ensure the long-term integrity of the wall. Works will include cleaning, repointing sections of the wall and maintenance works to ensure that the drainage network in the properties fronting 1 to 11 Ben Baldwin Terrace is working properly.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
You have the floor again, Councillor O'Boyle.
Yeah, just looking for a report on this too, but it's just the front side of Holborn Hill. And there's a lot of damage being done to the roads. We're constantly on to the roads engineer about trying to get the potholes filled in this, and just wondering if this could be included.
So, Mayor, further to recent on-site reviews, it's considered that both Barrack Street and Holborn Street are in need of surfacing upgrades over the coming years. It's intended that a section of Barrack Street will be included in the 2022 schedule of works for the Borough District, and that Holborn Street will be included on the 2023 schedule of works. In the meantime, we'll carry out pothole repair as necessary.
That's brilliant. Great news. And the next one.
Councillor O'Boyle, item number 10.
The next one is just a query. I was speaking with Tom Kieran's already. Just some of the complaints we're getting is that sometimes the lights are changing literally fast as people are kind of moving through them. And there is the element where people will be on their phones and not paying attention or on the radio or something. But I just think sometimes the lights around the town area in general just are too quick.
So, just the report, first of all, Mayor. In November 2021, following the completion of the N4, N15 traffic improvement scheme, the traffic signal network along the Inner Leaf Road and adjacent junctions transitioned from a fixed time control system to a more efficient SCOOT system. SCOOT stands for Split Cycle Offsets Optimization Times. It's a control system which automatically adjusts traffic signal timings to adapt to current traffic conditions, using traffic flow data that's collected from a series of sensors in the road network. So SCOOT will calculate the most appropriate signal timings to ensure that the region that traffic delays are minimized and that junction timings are coordinated as well as possible. Since the introduction of the SCOOT system, motorists may be observing or experiencing different waiting times at some junctions along the road network. However, the evidence is that at this stage, the SCOOT system is yielding improvements in the overall performance of the system. Now, what that means is that on certain junctions, the phasing in the lights will be changing quicker than before to respond to the traffic demands on the different nodes of a junction or along the network. And what it means is that driver behaviour will have to change as well to keep an eye on the lights. We do know that a lot of people are sitting looking at their phones when they're waiting at a red light. So the system is operating more efficiently, and so we need the drivers to equally operate more efficiently. We are aware that you've raised issues or concerns about a number of junctions, Union Street, for example, the bottom of Gallows Hill. We will look at those, but I think the junctions that you've highlighted, if there are delays occurring, the delays are occurring on the quieter nodes, where priority has been given to the busier.
Yeah, no, that's fine, being honest. It's thanks for the report, but just one of the ones was Jerry Monaghan's shop there. It's just that there has been kind of an increase in accidents there. Now again, it comes down to driver awareness. I think sometimes the lights are in the process of changing and the car behind you try and scoot through while there's another car coming over. So maybe if that other one can be looked at, but thanks very much for the report and the response. Thank you, Mayor.
Just to come in on Councillor Boyle's motion in relation to out at Cartron Junction, as you swing out towards Ross's Point. A number of people came to me, and I've actually witnessed it myself, and especially people going in and out of Cartron, is the filter light that brings you around onto Point Road. Now, I do understand that if there's a pedestrian waiting to cross, the light stays red, and that's fair enough. Let you through. But a lot of the time, there's absolutely nobody there, and the traffic is moving out. We'd say from direction the Ross's Point back on to the N15, N4, back onto it. But yet the traffic that's varying around to the left to go towards Ross's Point, it's hell there, and there's absolutely no pedestrians or anything else on it. And a lot of people has come to me, so it's just one to look at. Is it could be maybe some kind of study put up on it. But that's the only one that I've seen, because in fairness, and I do collect my son in at work a lot of evenings at 12 o'clock, and it's a straight run in. I come down the minute you hit canvas first, the lights, they change. It's the same, the filter light over the docks, it changes straight away, and you're over. Once there's no other traffic at that indeed other junctions, and it does, it fairly runs. But that's one area that I'd like to have looked at, if all possible. Item number 11, if it's okay with Councillor McSharry, we'll take his motion 15 as well with that. Would that be all right with you, Councillor McSharry? They're both in relation to the one aspect of things. The one thing, and I would say it in relation, I suppose I'll speak first on it because mine is the motion was in first. When I put in this motion in relation to it, and I was asking a number of questions in relation to it, it preceded the report that came out in the Sligo Champion. And the Sligo Champion had talked to our senior executive engineer, was Tom Confeder, in relation to, and Tom gave a brilliant outline on exactly the works that needed to be carried out. So there's a lot of this motion that I have here that all the questions are answered in. And I do understand that it was the OPW, I think, provided 72,000 for coastal erosion survey to be done, not just in Sligo, but around the areas we've lost in the bad weather there alone in Strandhill and other coastlines. Up on 5 foot of coastline has disappeared. And realistically, I know we had high tides bet with high winds. It wasn't the worst weather we had compared to even last year, and I'm afraid of what's coming down the line. And I do know that all of this is just waiting on a report coming through. But the hammering that our shoreline is going to the possibility is going to get. It might be a little too late when that money actually comes on board. But one of the questions, and it's actually mentioned here in my motion, is in relation to the water treatment plant. Now, I know it's a good distance away from the shore at the moment, but the rate the shore is deteriorating. It won't be long. If that report is going to take much longer, the danger is that if the seawater gets in at that water treatment plant, is the damage that it's going to do and the money that cost. And that's going to be irretrievable if that happens. And but the main thing in relation, I suppose, to the motion itself that I have to acknowledge the fantastic response by our staff in Sligo County Council. They were out there, they had that whole promenade blocked off. They did high tides and winds. They were out to cleaning up very quickly after and try and make it as safe as possible to stop the ordinary general public from going in. And that has to be acknowledged. And I'd ask you all to support the motion. What is there in relation to water treatment? As I said, there's no sense in me going into the rest of it there about what Mr. Confederate says in relation to the coastal armour and things like that. Like all that's going to depend on when this report comes back. I'd ask you all to support it. Mr. McSharry, your motion is...
I suppose, look, we're all, I suppose, very conscious, Mayor, of the aggressive nature of coastal erosion, and in particular out in Strandhill. I know I had a motion down, I think it was 4 years ago, specifically dealing with rock armour, and I had a motion down last year, and we've all had motions down, we're all aware of it. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of the Strandhill Coastal Erosion Committee and thank them for keeping myself and I'm sure other councillors updated. And I know, as you say, Mayor, and I would just like, I suppose, one amendment to my motion. The Sligo County Council Executive asked that the report survey on coastal erosion Strandhill, Sligo, could, as opposed to would, be fast-tracked as a matter of urgency, because I am conscious that there is a lot of good work going on the ground. And we are waiting for the report. And as you've stated, Mayor, you know, time is of the essence here. Time would appear to be against us. And when you look at the golf club and the caravan park, and again, as I've stated, the aggressive nature of the coastal erosion, and then you try and marry that with what has happened out in Ross's Point, where they did get a report. And I was out there yesterday, and the rock armour has withstood Storm Borough and the high tides this winter. And as you say quite correctly, we don't know what the weather will do next, but that has and seems to be successful. And I think that, I suppose, I can't preempt the report, I'm no expert, but I do envisage that probably rock armour will become one part of the solution, and then we have to look at funding, and the funding will be a lot of money. I know that there is funding sources there before. Again, like yourself, Mayor, I would like to acknowledge the County Council staff and the speedy way in how to deal with matters, and indeed Director of Services Tom Confeder, the OPW, and again the Strandhill Coastal Erosion Committee. And I suppose, again, we're conscious that there is work ongoing in difficult times with COVID. And all I would ask that if this, I think Mr. Confeder indicated the fourth quarter of this year, perhaps maybe it's feasible, maybe it's not, but it's no harm in asking that report could be brought forward if it's possible, just to give us an idea of what the recommendations are. In relation to Ross's Point, I think it was 4 years that we're waiting for the report, and then the rock armour went in, and we can see the results there. So hopefully we won't have to wait too long, because it is a massive issue, and it's a massive issue of concern to everybody, not only the people in Strandhill, but everybody in the area, everybody that enjoys Strandhill, that loves Strandhill, and we've just seen all these great proposals for the area. But you know, I suppose again, we're against the time and we're against the elements. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Mayor. So as a member of the Coastal Erosion Committee in Strandhill, we are not in agreement with either of these motions. As Councillor McSharry has outlined, we've worked extremely hard over the last number of years. We have had a delegation from the OPW, we have met with the Minister, we have secured funding for the report. We engaged constantly with the staff in the council, and I would like to join my colleagues in thanking them for their consistent good work down there. They're always incredibly responsive whenever we have an issue and address it immediately. However, these motions are what we would view as being political interference in a report which is not political. We were advised when we got the funding that it would take 18 months, And there's a reason for that. The survey has to be carried out for a full 12-month period in order for the surveyors to see exactly the movement of the water and the effects on the coastline. And any suggestion to fast track it would actually undermine the report. So we do not support either motion, nor the suggestion that rock armour should be extended. Those are matters for the experts. They have to advise us. That's why we've engaged them, is for them to tell us how the tide affects the coastline and what is our best options to deal with it. So I would strongly reject both motions, and I do so on behalf of the Coastal Erosion Committee in Strandhill.
Mayor, maybe I'll come in on this motion.
Go ahead.
I suppose just to confirm what the Mayor and Councillor McSherry has said, and Councillor Maguire has reiterated, that there are consultants, RPS, who are experts in this field. They commenced work on a combined coastal erosion and flood risk management study for the greater Strandhill coastline and also the East Quay coastline. And this commenced last August. And the very nature of these studies means that they are a lengthy process and data needs to be gathered. So this study will inform us in detail of the coastal erosion and coastal flooding processes at the two sites. And it's really important to understand the geography of it. It will also guide us towards what practical interventions are possible to alleviate the erosion at the problem sites. Now, we do expect to have an interim report before the summer and a final report certainly before the end of 2021. So that's the timescale, but we need the science in order to be able to make decisions.
Sorry, can I just add as well, sorry, Emer, I forgot to mention that RPS have agreed to meet with us as a subcommittee. So they are meeting with us in the next number of weeks in Strandhill. So we are getting updates and we're very happy with the updates that we're receiving.
Councillor Grady.
Mike.
Councillor Grady, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mayor. I just feel that, as has been outlined, we should leave it with the experts. But I have a huge concern about the whole western seaboard, the amount of coastal erosion that's there. And I think governments have to look, and government has to look at putting a national plan in place for the coastal erosion, rather than piecemeal a little bit here and a little bit there. And I do think it's something that central government should be reminded of, the need for a national plan. But I do acknowledge the work that has been done by the committee at Strandhill, and I think it's wise that we take the advice of the experts. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor McSherry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Emer for her update, and that's welcome, because that's really all I was looking for, was if it could be fast-tracked. But now I understand that there will be an interim report in Q2, and that's most welcome, Emer. And if you could, because there's only 6 councillors here in Sligo Strandhill, maybe you could share that report, because any updates are certainly welcome to us. Again, we are the public representatives. A lot of people are ringing us every year after we have high tides or aggressive coastal erosion. It is very worrying and concerning in the community out there in Strandhill, as well as it is in Sligo. And that's why the councillors have all got calls, and it is well within our remit to put down motions. That's what we're here for. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Councillor Gibbons putting forward a motion. Rock armour, I brought it up 4 years ago, but again, we can't preempt a report that is on the way. We acknowledge all the hard work that has been done. We welcome the fact to be an update, and I think, Councillor Gibbons, well, your motion, I suppose, preempts the report. All I'm asking for is if it could be fast-tracked. Could be, not would be, could be. But I'm happy that there will be an update, and I'm happy, Emer, and I'm sure that you will keep the councillors updated and maybe share your interim report in Q2.
Can I just come back on that? It's in relation to it. My motion that I put down It's on the back of a lot of concerned people. Right, granted, they're not experts. I'm not an expert in it or whatever else. A lot of people wondering why at Strand Hill that the rock armour couldn't go in the same as it has at Ross's Point. I'm just an ordinary 5'8". Thank you, Emer, for explaining, and actually you made it very clear, and I come in here kind of leaving here today with a wee bit more knowledge than I had coming in. But a lot of people on the way they've seen it, they've seen the damage that was done at Ross's Point Beach. The beach was nearly gone before the rock armour went in. The rock armour has stood up to the bad weather. We are in a situation now that, as you said yourself, there's an internal report coming out, and then there's the final report coming up at the end of 2022, isn't it? Yeah. So that's coming up at the...
Yes.
And we have a lot of time between now and then, and we can't preempt what the weather is going to do. And realistically, we are going to lose huge chunks of area. That was my concern for the likes of the water treatment plant, the caravan park, which is somebody's livelihood, whether we like it or not, private property that's within that area. Now, I'm not turning around and saying the armour is the solution. I'm not. And for anybody actually to turn around, no, in fairness, for anybody to turn around and say that this is politically motivated or politically gained, it's not. We're public representatives. And when people contact us for a solution, that's what we are trying to do. When somebody asks me a question, I don't turn around to them and say, do you support Sinn Féin or do you support Fianna Fáil or I don't. Reality to it. I work on behalf of the people, and these are concerns, and a lot of concerns from people living in Strandhill. And do you know something? A lot of these people know that shoreline an awful lot better than an awful lot of them that's carrying out that report. They've lived there for generations, and to see the ground in front of them disappearing, and that's it. And they're afraid of what the weather is going to throw up. Like, we're only in January as it is at the moment. We still have a lot of rough weather to go before we get in anywhere near the summer months. And that is my concern, and that was my reason for putting the motion down. But I want to thank you, Emer, because as I says, I actually learned an awful lot here listening to you. I learned more, or how would I put it? I'm leaving here more wiser than I was coming in. Thank you.
Can I just respond, please, Mayor? We would have had similar ideas in relation to rock armour as a coastal erosion committee when we started a number of years ago. And we have learned, and it is a very scientific issue. And while the people locally obviously know the land, it's actually a very scientific matter in relation to tides, movement of water, and the rock armour that was put in to protect the water treatment plant. Unfortunately, when you put a hard barrier against the sea, it has a knock-on impact somewhere. The water always goes somewhere. And we actually lost the large dune in Strandhill after that rock armour was put in. So we have to be very careful about what we suggest and where you're going to put it, because it will have a knock-on impact later on somewhere else along the coast, and it will present another problem. So that's why, as a group, we are really grateful that we got the funding for the report. We're happy that it's in the right hands, and we are willing to wait for a full scientific response and to tell us what is the best way to deal with it, because we are all really concerned about it and have been for a long time, because we're looking at it, as you said, every day. And as Councillor O'Grady has said, it's an issue along the western seaboard, but it is a very scientific matter, and it's not something that can be that easily addressed. And it will take a lot of money when we get whatever result we get will require funding, and we will require a lot of lobbying at that point from all political people. Thank you.
Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, just a quick query. I don't. Have you any idea of what, if no rock armour, is?
There's hard and soft options is what they call it, and then there's also a do not act option. And I suppose ongoing throughout the world, there are different developments happening in relation to this all the time. So we're watching what's happening in New Zealand, we're watching what's happening in Australia and other places, and what solutions they're coming up with and whether we can incorporate those.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, I'm happy on the information that I got here in relation to the explanation from everybody involved. I'm happy enough to withdraw this motion. I think myself that it makes sense because, as was explained here with coastal tide currents, everything else in relation to it, to try to push this motion forward, it might hamper the good works that is going on there at the moment. And what I will do in relation to it, I'll withdraw that motion. Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to agree with what you said. This has been very educational, and thank Emer. And perhaps when Emer maybe shares the interim report, maybe Councillor Maguire might give us an update from the Strandhill Coastal Erosion Committee that we're all on the same page. I think that's the most important thing. But again, I would stress it's very important that councillors feel that they have the right to put down motions, whether they're accepted or not. I think it encourages debate, good, healthy debate, and that's what we've had here today. So I wasn't aware that there would be an interim report, and I'm happy enough that Emer will share that with the elected representatives, and maybe that coupled with an update from Councillor Maguire on behalf of the Strandhill Coastal Erosion Committee would satisfy us, hopefully. Thank you, Mayor.
Always happy to update anybody at any time.
Good.
Thank you.
Item number 13, recognising the Strandhill as a major tourist attraction and as a very self-conscious, proud and hard-working community. I'm calling on the Roads Department of Sligo County Council to initiate a phase of works on a 3-year programme to carry out the works that is needed at the top road in Strandhill to bring it up to an accessible standard that meets the approval of the community. Now,
second that motion.
The history of this top road was that works was to be carried out on this road and the funding for it was to be provided from the development fund. Over the last number of years, the money in the development fund, because naturally enough recent developments hasn't taken place, it's up to 130,000. Now, by the time we get that anywhere near the developments, it'll never reach the funding that is needed to carry out the works for the resurfacing of that road, the footpaths and the traffic calming measures and whatever else. So what I am asking in relation to it is that a 3-year programme of works is taken in a 3-phase basis to carry out, to include works within 2022 roads programme, 2023 and 2024. And I think if it's broke over a 3-year term, it'll get that work complete, because as it is at the moment, that 130,000 is devaluing and devaluing and devaluing. That's if that money is even still there. I don't know, is it in a separate account or is it just waiting there to be used, or have we used it on something else? But if it is there, that it could subsidise any or further works that it was going to be done on it. But the road itself needs upgrading. As I said, it's a tourist attraction. It's one of our biggest industries. We've seen it here even during the lockdown, how busy Strandhill was. Strandhill is not just the seafront, which we discussed here this morning in detail. Strandhill is a beautiful village. And I think myself, and I have to commend the people living in Strandhill, because a lot of the people in that area keep that top road in a pristine, clean condition, but it does need upgrading. So I'm asking you all to support this motion. Thank you very much.
I did already. Yeah. I just want to support that. This is something that has come before the council on numerous occasions, and I know we were advised that we were waiting for, as Councillor Gibbons has outlined, the construction and development on the top road to be completed, and I'm aware there are 1, if not 2 potential sites still on that top road which are awaiting development, but it's been years and years left in the state it is in at the minute. It's undulating, a huge amount of traffic, and I'm grateful for the council that put in a speed monitoring sign at the entrance to the village. I think that did help, but still you have huge volume of traffic with footpath inconsistent on one side, not on the other, and there's a lot of housing and people walking down to the seafront and use it on a constant basis, and it's quite dangerous. Thank you.
Mayor, I might come in here on the motion.
Okay, go ahead, Cole.
Just, I suppose, to concur that this motion has come up before in the chamber, and just to say that the Road Design Office are currently working on the preparation of a preliminary design of the R292 on the top road, and we're looking at following active travel standards, which will ensure that it is applicable for pedestrians, cyclists and traffic, and this guidance is prescribed by the National Transport Authority. Because of the scale of the works that will be involved, it's very likely that it will require Part 8 planning and also some land acquisition, but that will all be followed through by the Road Design Department. So once the design is concluded, we will go through the Part 8 process and apply to the National Transport Authority for further funding in order to deliver it. And I think the 3-year programme is a very sensible approach, and I think approaching it through the active travel potential funding may be advantageous.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cocan.
Thanks, Emer. That's a really welcome report, and I agree. I think the active travel is a fantastic way to do it, particularly when it is such a busy road that's used by pedestrians and cyclists as much as vehicles. Thank you.
Right, everybody happy enough with that? No. Item number 14, Councillor McSharry. I'll second that.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mayor. And in fairness to all councillors here have raised this over the years. My first motion was February 19, and then I asked for an audit and an update in September 21. So I'm just wondering, Brian, if you have a report or has an audit been carried out, or what's the position, please?
So, Mayor, no audit has been carried out to date, but the area engineer will carry out an assessment of the roads and footpaths in Thornhill over the coming weeks. If it's determined that upgrading works are necessary, and we envisage there are, these works will be considered during the finalisation of the 3-year works programme for the period 2022 to 2024. We're hoping to come to you at the next municipal district with a draft 3-year programme, and that will inform us all more.
Yeah. As the seconder of the motion, I'd like to concur with my colleague, Councillor McSharry. I've been up, had a look at that area and whatever else. There is a wide-scale footpath repairs needed in the area, and there is a lot of elderly residents. It's a settled community. I actually remember when that estate was built, and that's gone back. That's it. That's going back. Got to 50 years ago, and over 50 years ago since it was done. There hasn't been massive money spent in that area or whatever else over the years, but it is time that the street got an uplift. The footpaths and parts of the road there where it needs to be done. So I'd like to support the motion as being the seconder. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd just like to welcome the report from Brian. I'm sure we were all up at Ms. Duggan's funeral there last week, and it was dark, and there was a lot of elderly people in the area, as Councillor Gibbons has said, and it's treacherous at the best of times. So hopefully it will qualify for the programme and be done sooner rather than later. Thank you, Mayor.
Item number 16. Councillor McSharry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have to say that I'm I suppose, heartened with the response I've got to this issue. I knew it was a problem, but I just put a small bit up on Facebook, and the response I've got is quite overwhelming. We all know, and again, all councillors have raised this issue a number of times, and there seems to be, still serious problems with dog fouling in the area, and I've got a number of areas that I'll deal with in a minute. But just in relation specifically to Cleaver Park, the Back Avenue, and Dorley Park, it's an area I walk on a regular basis, and I meet a lot of people, and I'm sure other councillors have got the same representations I have. But say if you start there opposite, the Belfry, for example, and you walk that way around the loop, there's only one unit, which is just beside the Garden of Reflection. Okay, I think there's another unit in Cleaver, in the park opposite the sports complex, and I think, in fairness, a lot of people that go in there go in by car with their dogs, and they're diligent enough. But I just would say that if you could put a unit maybe at the entrance of the park opposite the sports complex, and maybe one unit from the Belfry right down just before the riverside, and then maybe another unit outside the council offices, and then you meet up perfectly with the next unit, which is at Dorley Park, and then you'll need maybe another 1 or 2 units between there and the racecourse, because it's a lovely walk. And it's a popular walk, with pet owners, but unfortunately there is a deficit of the dog fouling units and the bags, and I think they are quite successful. I know, say the example I would give is maybe the promenade out in Ross's Point. When the units went in, they're used, they're utilised, and I think it's something that it's a big issue everywhere. Just when you're taking notes, Brian, I don't exercise your hand too much, but I also got reps for, say, Cedar Drive Bridge, the Maher O'Boy area, O'Boyle Park, Cemetery Road, Markovich, and again, which has become a very popular walk, is the new road from Caltra to Oakfield. Maybe that could be considered as well. But in relation to my own motion, it's Cleaver Park, Back Avenue, and Dorley Park. So I'm just wondering if there's a report, or what's your thoughts on it? Or
there are currently 5 or 6, I need to just clarify that, dog fowl bins between Dorley Park and Cleaver Regional Park. The bins are strategically located at the primary start and end nodes of typical walking routes, and as such, we consider that there's reasonably sufficient numbers of receptacles in that area. We do, however, recognise that there's a need for additional receptacles west of Dorley Park, so that's between Dorley Park and the town centre, and bins will be located along those routes in the coming weeks. I suppose just a couple of points I would make on it is that, the greater number of bins that we put in, putting the bin in the facility there is one thing, but there's operational issues then in terms of greater use of our resources and having to go around and empty bins. So we have to, be mindful that we don't, overstretch ourselves in terms of having bins everywhere. And that's where we hope that dog owners would accept some responsibility as well. And carry their dog waste to the nearest receptacle, rather than an expectation that, every 300, 400, 500 metres that I walk, I'm going to be met with one of these dog fowl bins. And yes, I do take your point in relation to the Western Distributor Road. There is certainly a shortage or a clear lack of them out there, and we look to address that shortly as well. But it's getting the balance right.
I'm not doubting you for a second, Brian, but I do. There's one at the Garden of Reflection. Where are the other 5 then from there to the racecourse? There's a few in Cleaver?
There's a few within Cleaver Regional Park itself, and the loop within the park.
There's none from the sports complex to the racecourse?
No, there's not, no.
Will you prioritise that as well as the west? Even if I settled for 2. If it was one from the sports complex up to the racecourse, maybe one then, as you said, the western side of the
We'll certainly look at that, but it's a case of ensuring that we get the balance right. And look, bear in mind that there are a lot of litter bins as well along the route that are used and can be used, but we don't want to,
Even if you could put in a bag dispenser, because I think that's sometimes that seems to be the problem, that people aren't bringing the bags with them.
Yeah, and again, we do have some bag dispensers around the parks, and what we're noticing about them is that there's a blatant abuse of bags. We could fill the bag dispenser at a point in the day and come back a few hours later and find that somebody will have taken half a dozen or more bags out of it. So yes, we want to see them used, but they need to be used properly.
If you could, I would settle for 2 if that was feasible, or if you could look into it and maybe come back to us. But at the moment, it's a big issue,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Balance, yeah. Thank you.
Jerry Cleveland, the second motion. Just to support Councillor McSherry's motion, but also just that some people have to take responsibility You know, it doesn't matter where you go, you can clean up as many times as you want, but there's still an element of people who just seem to walk their dog and let them do whatever they want on it. So maybe if we could get kind of the thing out that, obviously we try and get as many bins out as possible in that, but just that people have to be more responsible for their own actions or their dog's actions. We all have dogs, we all bring them walking, and sometimes you might have a bag or sometimes you mightn't have a bag, you know. But it's just where it's constant over abuse, and as you says with the bags, sometimes there's bags, sometimes there's not, but there is a bit in kind of abuse of the bags. I've often seen up in our own places, Councillor McSherry said, O'Boy Park, we clean the track at 9 in the morning. By 10 o'clock, there's people in the dogs, you know, and the bags are gone. So, people just have to take more responsibility for their own actions, I think, but definitely in support of the motion of having extra bins around.
Can I just come in on the back of that, and as somebody, I suppose, had dogs over the last, and still have dogs since I got my own property, kind of as kids, my parents had kind of the attitude when we were growing up that it was cruel to keep a dog in town, unless you were able to exercise or whatever, but I was one of these people that always felt it. I always loved a dog around the house, and over the last 30 odd years since I got my own home, my own family, we've always had sometimes up to 2 dogs. And would you believe it? I'd bring the dog for a walk, and the last thing that ever crosses my mind is a dispenser to throw in the waste bag. I always bring it home with me. You never think of bringing it home. And realistically, as was says there, and I know the last 2 speakers, the proposer and the seconder said the same thing, people have to take responsibility of their own dogs. It's as simple as that. I go out with the dog, I do bring the dog on the bike. It's actually a kind of focal point with some people. I know myself that a lot of the councillors here would have witnessed me going around with the dog attached to the bike, and it's specially designed dog I have as a beagle, and it needs a lot of exercise. But if that dog gets caught short on the middle of the road, you lift it. It's as simple as, and that's not even on the footpath. You still lift it and you bring it home with you. And that's where people need it. Now, the most devastating thing news that I've ever heard in relation to it, there was a problem with Cranmore where the dogs was fouling. And people was coming from outside of Cranmore to walk their dogs on the green. But it was the children and the grandchildren, the people in Cranmore, and they were coming in with more on their shoes than just grass. And that's the reality to it. And when I made the suggestion at the time that we'd use the cameras that was in the area, find out who was at it, and prosecute. That's the best way of doing anything. It sends a message out there, it's not going to be tolerated. And then we were told that the information out of the cameras could not be used within the courts to make a prosecution for that. And that was the one thing about it. So I think myself that the law needs to be changed a wee bit. People need to take responsibility. I have no problem with supporting the motion, reality to it keeps it clean. But as you did say in relation to it there, Brian, it's the resources that's being used to clean them and even to install them, to pay for them and everything else, that resources could be used elsewhere. You know, and that's kind of where I would be with it. But I do support the motion, I do support the sentiments of it, but I do think that people out there need themselves to waken up. It's their dog, their dogs that's fouling, and they need to take responsibility. They need to clean it up. Thanks very much. Item number 17, Councillor Bray.
Mayor, over 2 years ago, in July of 2019, the Council unanimously voted in favour of a motion which I had submitted, that draft bylaws be prepared so as to prohibit heavy good vehicles from using the road network through the Cranmore Housing Estate, Martin Savage Terrace and Doherty Park Housing Estates and Cleaver Drive, with a permit system to be included to allow heavy goods vehicles make local deliveries. Now, I tabled the motion because residents in the Martin Savage Terrace area, Doherty Park, Cranmore and Cleaver area are seeking the introduction of bylaws to ban heavy goods vehicles from the area. With the exception of the business parks in Cleaver, the area in question is largely residential. Residents are seeking the ban because of issues relating to pedestrian safety, along with concerns relating to infrastructural damage, pollution and noise emissions. The residents are also anxious to have the heavy goods vehicles bylaws in place in advance of the new Eastern Bridge being built. Residents understand that if a ban is introduced, regulations can be implemented making exceptions for lorries making deliveries in the area. Now, I also understand that the draft bylaws would have to go out for public consultation before any final decision would be made by the Council. I believe this is reasonable so as to allow all sectors of the community to have an input into the process. And given that 2.5 years have passed since the Council resolved that the draft bylaws be prepared, residents are now anxious to know when it's expected that the draft bylaws will be brought before the council for consideration. I formally move the motion here.
Councillor Boyd. I just come in on that. Sorry, go ahead.
Quirlick, I'm just going to respond to the motion if that's in order. Yes, Councillor Bree is correct. The last occasion this was discussed in a council meeting, it was agreed that the starting point that this would be referred to our legal agents for their consideration and to include an examination of what we understand to be very limited precedent in this area in the country. So, but we haven't yet requested our legal agents to commence this. This is because we've had two very significant legal cases over the last 2 years that have required significant support from our law agents, and we've prioritised those matters. Both these cases have reached significant milestones in the interim, and it will facilitate us engaging now with our legal agents. And also, since last discussed, we have been successful in receiving sanction for the employment of a senior executive engineer on a 5-year contract who will be specifically dedicated to the Eastern Garbogue Bridge scheme. And we hope to make this appointment in the next number of weeks, and that this appointee will be able to progress this issue in conjunction with our law agents. And just lastly, I'll also mention, and just to feed into the process, the local transport plan for Sligo is currently commencing, and this will cover all modes of transport and speed limits, etc. And this will also inform the process. And also, as Councillor Bree has already mentioned, public consultation will be a key element in this in this process. But I guess the message is that we're now in a position to bring this forward with our law agents, and we will keep the members updated as it progresses.
Mayor, I'd like to thank Emer for the response. Certainly, big bodies move slowly. If it's taken over 2 years before the actual resolution that we adopted is passed on to our solicitors, it doesn't send out a positive signal to the general public. They expect local authorities to work in a more speedy fashion. I'm disappointed that it's taken such a length of time. Having said that, we are where we are. The matter is now being referred to our legal agents, and I'm assuming we won't have to wait another 2 years for them to respond. I suppose we'll allow them a number of months, and I'll come back to the council or to the Borough District for an update. So we'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, just in support of Councillor Bray, I think it's the right thing to do, leave it for a couple of months and come back to it then.
I think we'd all support the motion. Every one of us that's here, we know that other people of Merton Savage and Dooley Park are actually facing on a daily basis, and those in Cranmore, like Cranmore's actually turned into a motorway coming down there, a lot of traffic coming down through, and it's bad enough without big articulated trucks coming across. Now going over through Merton Savage Terrace, Dooley Park, the roads are they're not fit for lorries. The reality to it, they're very narrow roads. There's parking, which there is residential parking within the area, and in fairness, there has been damage done to a lot of cars, residential cars there, with trucks that's coming over there, trying to navigate going over that road. And I feel myself something needs to be done. It's welcome that something is coming down the line in relation to it that will resolve that problem. Thanks very much. Councillor Bree, number 18.
Mayor, on a number of occasions over the years, I tabled motions requesting the Council Executive to liaise with the Office of Public Works to investigate the possibility of developing a walking route to the cairn located above the Fox's Den on Cairns Hill, and I wish to thank Council officials for doing so. Some months ago, an area of 23.5 acres on Cairns Hill, on which the Neolithic monument is located, was advertised for sale. When the Office of Public Works and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage did submit offers for the lands, it's my understanding that the bids were either too little or too late, and the lands in question were sold to a private individual. Now, given the significant importance of the archaeological site and its strong association with local mythology, I believe, even at this stage, that the Council should seek a meeting with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage and the Office of Public Works with a view to investigating the possibility of developing public access to the cairn. In proposing this, I have to say, Mayor, that I am hopeful that the new owner of the lands would be willing to enter into negotiations with the OPW and the Department so as an agreement could be reached to allow public access to the cairn. In recent times, officers of the Carrow District Regeneration Association have also lobbied and campaigned to have a structured walk provided, and they remain committed to this objective. If the new owner is agreeable to accept compensation for some form of access, a management strategy or protocol would clearly need to be put in place to ensure the protection of the monument itself. The Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage has already acknowledged that Sligo's numerous passage tombs are a remarkable asset, and he recently endorsed the recommendation from an expert advisory group to review applications to become part of a new tentative list of potential World Heritage properties for Ireland. The expert group has recommended that the passage tombs of Sligo be placed on this new tentative list. So in this context, Mayor, I believe we should again communicate with the Minister's Department and the Office of Public Works in the hope that a resolution can be found that will allow public access to the monument. I'm therefore proposing that the Council Executive seek a meeting with the Department and with the OPW with a view to investigating the possibility of developing public access to the Neolithic monument located above the Pottsdale on Cairns Hill. I formally move the motion, Mayor.
Second that motion.
I think Councillor Boylan second.
I second that motion. I think also reiterate, maybe if there are some with new owners and that there's some discussions that can take place about getting public access to it. So support the motion.
Thank you. I too want to support the motion. Like Councillor Bria, I was disappointed when the government and the council weren't in a position to secure this particular property. Cairns Hill is part of the Neolithic landscape that forms part of the submission in relation to the UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's incredibly important to us. It's been mentioned here today in the report from KPMG. I think everybody recognises the huge wealth that our Neolithic heritage gives us, a unique wealth in this part of the country, unlike anywhere else actually in Western Europe. So I was really disappointed when we weren't in a position to secure it. From my brief knowledge about it, I understand the buyer is very sympathetic to the cairn, and the purpose, at least that I was advised of, the purchase was to ensure that it was protected. So if that is the case, I'd be hopeful that they might be open to the idea of allowing public access to it, which I think should be maintained, as it is a really key feature in our historic offering. Thank you.
Unless someone would like to support the motion, I see the likes of these cairns, and they're vital within the tourist attractions within this country. A lot of people come from all over the world to see them. They're absolutely fantastic in structure, the stories behind them, the mythological stories that we learned going to school, and behind it with Fimaku and all that aspect of things. It's all there, and it's part of who we are. It really is, and it isn't something that should be kind of closed off, we'd say, to privatization. It's something that should be there, that's open to the public, that visitors can come here, come and see it. Like, this country has everything to offer, as people say. It's the only thing we don't have is the weather, and something like that we could promote and really promote. I know it is being promoted, but add to the collection that we already have there, to the tourist end of it and to the public end of it. I think it'd be fantastic to see it. So I would hope that the owner of the property will be sympathetic to enter negotiations to allow that to be opened, and that it was supervised by the right authorities. Thanks very much. Item 19, Councillor Bree.
I know, just to confirm that we will make contact with the relevant section in the Department of Heritage and the OPW with a view to the possibility of getting public access onto that cairn and onto that site.
Welcome that response, Mayor.
Apologies for that, Director of Services. It's kind of everything to my left eye kind of is kind of a big focus. Item number 20, Councillor O'Grady. Oh, sorry, Councillor Breen, 19.
I'll second that motion.
Mayor, last March I submitted a motion requesting the Council to investigate the possibility of growing appropriate wall climbing plants on the concrete retaining wall fronting the river at Garrigold Villas. That's the wall between the Blue Lagoon and the road into Garrigold Villas. In response, I was advised that the Parks Roads Department would carry out an assessment of the wall in order to determine its suitability for climbing plants. A concern was expressed at the time about the possibility of roots from such plants penetrating cracks or joints in the wall, thereby potentially causing structural damage, and it was suggested that the provision of a living wall along a portion of the 70-metre long retaining wall, and possibly in combination with a green biodiversity-themed mural, might be a more appropriate solution. And I'm now anxious to know if the assessment was carried out in the intervening period and what was the outcome. Thanks, Mayor. Formally move the motion.
I think we both seconded.
Councillor Maguire.
I had a motion in relation to this wall a number of years ago after being approached by somebody asking for a mural to be put on this wall. So I would support the motion. I think it's a very large structure that isn't particularly attractive at the minute in a very attractive part of town. So whether it's a mural or whether it's a living wall, I would be in agreement with something being done with it. Thank you.
Also in agreement.
Councillor Boyle.
Both Councillor Maguire and Councillor Bree. It is kind of an eyesore sometimes, whether it's moral or proper plants on it. Sooner something is done, the better.
I suppose myself, as I'd have to support the motion. I think Sligo has become very accustomed to a lot of murals on the walls, and we've seen them. We actually seen one that actually had to be removed and it had to be replaced again at Maud Gone, and I think we thought that it's absolutely lovely when you do come. And a lot of the murals that is actually painted on the walls within the town, it's telling the story of our heritage. A lot of it, our history, our heritage, our folklore, all of those things. And I think all of the likes of that, it adds to the town. It adds to the eloquence of the area. Like even over that area is a beautiful area over there along the river. And I think it is something that we should be able to see. We should see it.
We finished.
Sorry, Councillor O'Grady, your mic is on. And no, but I would say it, and even there, I see it on Tracy Avenue there on the steps, and there's modern art done up the wall and everything else. And it cleaned up that whole area. It really made a significant difference to it. And yes, I think myself, it's worthwhile. I think myself is to do something with that wall. If it's just mural, let's put on, or live art or whatever else, but that something is done with it. I think it'd add to the area. That's it. Thank you. Sir, or Brian, sorry.
Mayor, the Council's Roads Department, in conjunction with Sligo Tidy Towns, are intending to bring forward proposals for aesthetic improvements to the retaining wall at Garrigold Villas. The Roads Department have recently invited quotations for the cleaning of this wall, and we've just appointed a preferred contractor to these works. The works are scheduled to commence in the coming weeks. So that will a washing, power hosing of the wall, and checking of drainage. Sligo Tidy Towns concurrently are liaising with a number of artists with a view to exploring various themes for artwork on the wall. Themes of interest currently include the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, some local interest themes such as BZ and biodiversity related themes. Stakeholder consultation with local community groups and the Council's planning department will follow as the themes are further developed.
Mr. Mayor, I wish to warmly welcome that report and look forward to a further progress report in the not too distant future. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, just to concur with that and say that the person who had contacted me originally had mentioned Beezy as being a potential person who might be remembered on it. I wasn't aware of her history, but seemingly she rode every day into town and lived on one of the islands on the lake, so she might be a very colourful person to add, but it's great that you're doing the public consultation and that people will have a say in relation to it. Thank you.
Sure, just on that, it is associated with a fisherman's site over there as well, so if Beezy's is on it, maybe some of the local fishermen who were there for long enough as well could be considered. I know Paddy McCarrick was often out on the river, and unfortunately he's passed away in the water too, so something like that for the locals. Thank you.
Well, the one that came to mind there when I just heard the name BZ, and I know there's a lot of stuff that we've done over the years on BZ. Galler was actually her name, but the person that comes to mind, and it do no harm maybe just to look into it, was Jumbo McCarrick. Jumbo McCarrick, as Councillor Bree would verify, he'd be kind of, he'd remember the character of Jumbo McCarrick around the same as I would. Jumbo McCarrick was a man who lived his life on Loughill. He was a man, along with Anthony Murray, went over in pushing a skiff in front of them across from Dooney Wood as far as Beezy's Island during the blizzard of 47 to make sure that Beezy Gallagher was well looked after. Jumbo McCarrick was one of the people that got the outdoor pool brought to Sligo, which Councillor Boyle and myself learned how to swim in. That was the reality to it. And he was one that was the Sligo swimming club that brought that, and they handed it over into they raised the funds for that. But Jumbo McCarrick, if modern day was bigger, was a big part of Sligo. And it's just an area to look at, because he was one of those people. He was a community activist. He was a people person. He tried his hand at everything. I think he had a bakery one time in Sligo and in Abbey Street. And I just think myself that he is somebody that maybe we shouldn't just forget about. And it's been nice maybe to look at. But he's somebody that is associated with Loughill and always was. And if I'm not mistaken, Paddy McCarrick was actually related to him. And that was, I think it was Paddy's grandfather or granduncle or whatever else, but the McCarricks had a big connection there. So yeah, I'd support any idea of any of the characters to do with Loughill. I think it'd be lovely there. Thanks very much.
Sure, the consultation will bring up all those.
Of course it will. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Mayor.
Item 21, Councillor O'Grady, I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you, Mayor.
Or sorry, 20, yeah.
20.
Sorry, 20.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just, brilliant, have we got a report on it?
Yeah, so similar to the Thornhill motion, the area engineer will carry out an assessment of the roads and footpaths in Tracy Avenue over the coming months. And again, any works that are necessary, we can look to consider them during the preparation and finalisation of our 3-year roads programme, 2022 to 24.
Thank you for that, Brian. And I firstly want to acknowledge the work that Thomas Kieran's engineer has done and his cooperation on many issues, footpath-wise, that I've had in Tracy Avenue. But I would appreciate that when the roads and the footpaths are being looked at, that the alleyway from the Strandhill Road up to Tracy Avenue would be looked at, because in the past it was my understanding that there was to be some collaboration with a private company that were going to put a surface on it, and that hasn't been done, or I don't think it has progressed. So when you're looking at that, you might also look at the alleyway and the surface and see, can that project be looked at again, that there would be cooperation between and get the surface done, which is in very, very, very poor repair at the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
As the seconder of the motion, I'd like to concur with Councillor O'Grady. I suppose we know of the inch of that, the footpaths around Tracy Avenue, and we know that alleyway, I suppose, better than everyone. We've seen a time there, and I have to say it in relation, we've seen a time there when we were growing up, that at least once a week there was some of the lads from the corporation, from the yard, used to be out to sweep that alleyway. And that's the other aspect too, and it's just to kind of keep it clean now. Don't take me wrong, I'm not saying it's in a bad way, but it does need resurfacing in relation to it. But like Thornhill, we just kind of take for granted an awful lot that these areas are sounding up because the people aren't shouting loud enough in them. There's some of the footpaths are in a fairly bad way in it, and they do need they need attention. And I would ask that it will be looked at by the road departments and try and bring it up. And I suppose the other aspect to it, and Councillor O'Grady says me something like being both from Tracy Avenue is kind of more our neighbours and next neighbours in that area are constantly in contact with us and highlighting the whole thing about the footpaths and everything else. So it is happening, you know what I mean? It is something, and it needs a few pounds to be spent on it and to try and bring it up. Because even if you look at the estate itself, it's a well-kept estate. There's absolutely fantastic residents within the area there that's keeping it. You know what I mean? Like, and even to the park doesn't look after itself on its own. It's the residents association within the area. So maybe, and if all possible, that we can get something done with it and give something back to the people for the hard work that have been putting in. Thanks very much.
Mayor, can I come back in as proposer of the motion?
You can, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say, Brian, that if there's areas identified, I will be very happy to allocate funding, as I'm sure the Mayor, Councillor Gibbons, would be, to get it moved on.
That'll be no problem. You know that yourself. Thanks. Item 21, Councillor O'Grady. I'll second that.
Thank you, for Mayor. Just in the last heavy rains, an area of the Strandhill Road between the Larkhill Road and the Roger Eames Road, there has been flooding halfway on the left-hand side as you go to Strandhill. So I thank you for the report that drain will be looked at. And again, if there's any upgrading needed, we'll be very happy to support whatever has to be done. Thank you, Brian.
So I can just confirm there, Mayor, that the gullies between Larkhill Road and the Roger Eames Road junction will be cleaned out in the coming week. It'll all be checked and cleaned.
Thank you for that.
Councillor O'Grady. Yeah.
Now,
item number 22, Councillor O'Grady.
Yeah, I put this down because some of the road surface in Kevinsfort is in quite bad state of repair, and I know that you were aware of some of it, Brian, because of the work that you did in it, I think 2019. But I would just like to see a continuation of what was commenced in 2019, and is there any possibility of that happening?
So, Mayor, there are no immediate plans for further upgrading of the roads in Kevinsfort. We are, as you know, in the process of putting together our 3-year works programme for period 2022 to 24, and we can certainly look at it in that context. However, the draft list that we have at the moment would see Kevinsfort towards the back end of that programme rather than in the current year, Councillor O'Grady.
Okay, thank you for that. And just thank you for the reports, and just say, Brian, it's good to see you back in the council chamber.
Thank you.
I'd like to second that motion, Councillor O'Grady. Thank you. Item 23, correspondence. There's no correspondence. Schedule of meetings for 2022. I have a list here now. It's just a. Geez, I'd lose my head if I wasn't screwed on. I'll run down through these list of meetings and look for your approval on them. Because the 18th of March, which was to be our next MD meeting, is going to be a bank holiday, we deferred it for 1 week. So we're looking at holding the Borough District of Sligo Strandhill for the 28th of March. 28th of March. The next meeting after that, then we're looking at 16th of June, 10 a.m. in the morning. All of these are 10 a.m. in the morning. What we are looking for now in relation to is the municipal district AGM. It's hard to believe we're talking about it already. For June. Now, what I was maybe looking at in relation to it, I think it was the 28th we had it on last year in June. Monday, the 27th for the AGM of June. How does that sound? Everybody happy with that? Yep. The July meeting, we are looking at the 18th of July. The September municipal district, we're looking for a date for that. I'd say the 3rd Monday. That's have we got it there. Yeah. This is for September now. Yeah.
Monday would be the 15th or the 22nd. Yeah, because the 1st of September is Thursday. The 8th is 2nd. 3rd is the 15th of September.
We'll be as well going the week after that, because in case there's any deferrals of the monthly meeting, the ordinary meeting. So we go the week, so you're looking at 22nd, isn't it?
22nd.
Yeah.
It's October last this year on my, because August was no meetings in.
Right, we're looking at June, and then we're coming in.
July.
We normally have one in September, do we? Or will we leave it till October? I have a date here for October, it's the 17th of October. Would you prefer?
17th of October.
Right, we'll call that the 17th of October, so we leave August and September out. Okay.
Mayor, could you just confirm the date again? 28th of March, 16th of June, and the AGM on the 27th of June.
No, the
Yeah.
16th of May.
16th of May.
Oh, sorry, it's the 16th of May. Oh,
Yeah, then the AGM is after that, which is the 27th of June. The Borough District Dean is July. We have the meeting on the 18th of July. Next month of that then is the 17th of October. And then we have the December one. It's the 19th of December. I think the 19th of December is too close to Christmas. Would we not be as well off to have that around the 28th of November or something like that? Wouldn't that make more sense? I actually had, I was looking at, yeah, it was 28th of November. Yeah, wouldn't that be a Monday?
yeah, would that be the date of the budget meeting? It's usually the last Monday, around the last Monday. No, it may not be.
Well, you see, the one aspect we can play with it, because if it's the day of the meeting, we can get it deferred for a week. And maybe bring it, not unless we pull it in the first week in December.
The following week, yeah. So if you want to go with the 28th of November and.
Yeah, we'll go with the 20.
Well, the 5th of December then would be the December council meeting.
Yeah, that's where we're running into it.
Actually, maybe you're better off going up with your September meeting.
Is the 12th of December too late?
No.
No, 12th December is no problem. You know what I'd nearly suggest in relation to it, if we leave the meeting, we just say for the 28th, if we leave it for the 28th of November and we can play with that when it comes closer to the day. What do you think, Declan? Instead of being tied into it. We'll just put in here date to be confirmed. Will that be all right?
And if you all repeat it now, so it's 28th of March, 16th of May.
28th of March, 16th of May. AGM is going to be on the 27th of June. Then in July, the 18th of July. Then the 17th of October. And then we said 28th of November.
We sent down the notification to everybody.
Yeah.
Confirm it tonight.
Because I think it starts at the 19th of December. You know, you're trying to get everything put aside for the Christmas and get it sorted, you know what I mean? Any other business? Any other business?
Great to be back here.
It is great to be back. It's actually, I felt like coming in home there. I was looking at my seat there, 15 years I spent there that went down. Do see stuff from you. I'd like to thank everybody else, or thank everybody here for your attendance at the meeting and for everybody's input. And I'd like to thank Dorothy and her staff. And once again, I'd like to thank Anya